Hey guys, and welcome to my wrap up for all of the books that I was able to read for the month of February. It is the shortest month of the year. I did get to quite a few books, not as many as I had originally planned to, but overall I think I had a pretty good reading month for the month of February, and I completed 10 books. I had one DNF, and all of the books I read for the month that actually finished were either 3 or 4 stars, so that was really good. Like I said, out of the 11 books, I had one DNF, 3 3 stars, and 7 4 stars. So let's just go straight into the books. I was definitely trying to read a lot of books by Black authors for the month since it was Black History Month, and I feel like I was able to accomplish that as well. So let's start with the books I liked least, and then we'll go more towards the ones that I had found a little bit more enjoyable. So there was one book I mentioned that I didn't finish, and I just realized I'm actually already lying. So I did have one 5-star read, so I had 6 4-star reads, not 7. So back to the DNF, and for me that was The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. I was listening to this one on audiobook, and I by no means think this is like a really bad book or anything, but it just wasn't really keeping my attention. I think I got maybe like 20% into the audiobook, and I realized this is also part of a series. I think it might just be a duology, I'm not for sure, but I felt like if I was going to finish the book, and I was probably going to give it around 3 stars, and I wasn't going to care enough to continue on with the next book in the series, so I figured why finish the book if I wasn't even really that invested in the characters. We're following these girls, and they're all part of this welcome house, and at the beginning of the book, it happens right away, and I think it's also explained in the synopsis that we're following this journey of 5 girls. One of them accidentally kills one of the men that is visiting the welcome house, and that sparks off their journey from there. This is a very kind of like Western but also sci-fi elements as well type of book, which I think is really a cool blend of genres. So if this is something that you're interested in, I wouldn't necessarily say don't pick it up. It's just wasn't a good fit for me, and I wasn't like fully gelling with it, so I didn't want to make myself finish something I wasn't completely enjoying, that I already knew I wasn't going to give the highest of ratings to. And then we have the 3-star books. So I had no 1 or 2-star ratings for February, so that is always a very big plus for the month. So of the 3 that I read that I gave 3 stars, I'll talk about first the one I don't own a physical copy of. It was a newer release, and it was one of my anticipated ones that was released pretty recently, and that was The Survivors by Jane Harper. I had read The Dry and Force of Nature by Jane Harper before, and I was really looking forward to another book by this author, and I thought it was good. It was like a mystery novel, and it's set in this small seaside town, and a body turns up on shore as our main character is returning back to the town, and it's kind of mirroring some similar things that happened I think it was like decades before, of a girl that had gone missing, and some other just small town mysteries and things that were going on. And what I love about Jane Harper's writing is that it's just very atmospheric, and I come for it for that. And this book definitely did hit that mark for me, but the actual story itself, the characters themselves, I just wasn't fully into, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Like, it was good, and I enjoyed reading or listening to the audiobook, I should say, for this one. But it's definitely not one of my favorites, and I don't see myself really reaching out to reread this book again in the future, or trying to own a physical copy of this book. And then we have The Secret Women by Sheila Williams. This book started off really, really well for me. I was sure it was going to get probably like 4 or 5 stars. This is another one that I listened to completely on audiobook, and it was very easy to listen to. It's very contemporary, and kind of, I guess if you want to put it in a genre, would be almost in women's fiction or women's lit. And what we're following is a group of 3 women, and they are all older. They all go to this yoga class, and that's how they all end up meeting. But they strike up this friendship one day, and they realize that they all have gone through losing their mothers recently, so they're kind of like a good grief support friend system for each other. And through the course of the book, we see them dealing with their grief, and also just like supporting each other and dealing with things they have going on with their family. And I think one of the things I did enjoy was that each of them was able to find out something about their past and about their mother through this process, and being there to help each other. But I don't know, it was a good book, but I just feel like, I don't know, I was expecting maybe just something different, I'm not sure, but I did really enjoy it. it just never really was hard hitting for me where I felt like emotional or anything. And I feel like especially with kind of a more hard hitting topic, I was kind of expecting a little bit more in that field. The book follows the perspectives of the 3 different women, plus there's a timeline in there following the past of one of the women's moms, and I just felt like there were so many characters and so many stories, and this is a short book that I was just found myself getting a little bit confused and forgetting like what was going on, because each of them have their story going on, and then they have like some sort of something going on in the past with their mom that's kind of a fixture of their stories as well. So it was just like a lot of characters, a lot of names, and a lot of trying to keep track of who was who, which I feel like I like books sometimes when they're like that, but when it's done really well, like that can be really great in a book to read. But I just like feel like with this one, it just didn't really gel as much, that kind of style. Then my last 3-star read was The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and this one is definitely a little bit of a disappointing 3-star read because I believe this book was part of my 5-star predictions list. I have to go back and look at that video because I know that it's been a long time. And I expected this one to be 5 stars because I do generally enjoy books about books, and this book is definitely one of those. We do get a lot of fun book stuff in here. We're following the perspective of this young biographer. Her name is, I forget now, Margaret. And she's being called on or hired to write the autobiography for this author who is very well known and is very secretive, though. Not a lot of people know about her. She's a recluse, but she's very well known for the novels that she's written. Most especially, she has this collection of 12 short stories that's called that's been like kind of called the 13th Tale because the 13th one is missing, and so it's also created this big like mystery around what the 13th Tale was and where it's gone. I really did like the writing, and I liked the like gothic type of atmosphere that we get because Margaret travels to Vita, who is the author's name, to her estate, and she ends up staying there during the course of her writing this biography and listening to her tell her life story. And I really like that atmosphere. There's definitely some like mystery things going on in here. Overall, I just feel like where the story went and the pacing of it was just a little bit of a disappointment, unfortunately, to me. This is definitely not something I feel like I'm gonna reach for again, even though I did not enjoy my time reading it. Like, it was enjoyable, but there were points where I felt like the book was feeling a little bit long and I wanted it to be a little bit shorter, which it's not even that long of a book. It's like, well, it's 400 pages, but there's a lot of like dialogue. And one thing I did like though was the chapters are really short. So that, I don't know why, when chapters are just really short, it makes me feel like I can fly through the book way faster. Parts that I enjoyed the best were the parts where Margaret is listening to Vita tell her life story, and we're just getting all Vita's life story. I feel like with Margaret's timeline, and she has a little bit of a mystery going on with her backstory as well. I just didn't find it as interesting, so that was one thing that also kept me from giving this book a higher rating. But overall, I can definitely see why a lot of people like this book and are drawn to this book. I definitely wouldn't say not to read it, but it's just, like I said, wasn't really a favorite for me. But I did like the author's writing, so I wouldn't be opposed to possibly trying another book from her in the future. Next, we will get into the 4-star reads. So like I said before, there are 6 books that I gave 4 stars to last month, and the first one was a historical fiction book. I really wanted to own a physical copy of this book, and I was able to email Simon & Schuster and they sent me one, so a very thank you to them. This was Yellow Wife by Sidika Johnson. I ended up listening to this one on audiobook, but it's definitely one that I would like to reread physically again in the future. And this is a historical fiction book, like I mentioned before, and it takes place on this plantation in Virginia, and we're following a young woman who is a slave, and she's been promised her freedom when she turns 18, but obviously things are not going to go as planned because it's a book and nothing ever goes as planned, and she ends up being sold, and she goes to work for this jail, which is like known to be a very cruel area. This book definitely tackles a very heavy subject matter. If you're someone who needs trigger warnings, I would definitely go ahead and look that up for this book, because it is a very like emotional and physical trauma as well, which is to be expected with a slave narrative. So anything that you would typically go along as trigger warnings for that topic, I would say, are in this book. While it's not an easy read, I feel like the author did a good job at approaching the subject in a very respectful way, and you can tell that she's very knowledgeable and informed, and I just really had, you know, as enjoyable of an experience as you can have with reading about someone going through the slave system. And it was definitely had some very tense parts in the book and sad parts in the book as well. I just think this is a really good, well done historical fiction novel that I would definitely recommend if this is something that you think that you might be interested in. Then we have a nonfiction book, and that is The Incredible Shrinking Woman by Athena Dixon, and I gave this one 4 stars, or maybe I think it was like 4.5 stars. This is an essay collection, and it's really just her exploring different things that she's gone through growing up as a young Black woman. She grew up specifically in a small like Midwestern town. I really loved her writing, and I would definitely read other books by Athena Dixon. After reading the first and second essays in this collection, I thought this was like so good. I thought I was gonna give it like 5 stars, but I feel like there's just, as the nature of essay collections are, there was some that I connected with and enjoyed more than others, but overall, like, this is a very well done essay collection. As someone who I don't know, I'm just not like super into reading stuff like this, but this one just really was well done to me. We get to look at her growing up and different things that she experienced because of her size and because of her race, and looking at different relationships that she's had as well, dealing with mental health and trying to just be comfortable with herself and make a place for herself in the world. It was just very inspiring at times, definitely, to read from, and I definitely would like to reread this again in the future, because I know there were just some specific paragraphs that really I feel like I could relate to and that I really enjoyed and would want to be able to read again. Next, I finally got to The Push by Ashley O'Drain, and this book was definitely worth it. So I think I attempted to read this book a couple of times, but the writing tense that's written from took me a second to get into, so I just sat down and was like, I'm just gonna read for 50 pages and see where it goes, because I had attempted, like I said, a couple of times to get into this book, and it was a little bit hard at first just because it's written in a writing style that I'm not used to reading from. I think it's called second person, but I could be wrong. That's just not something I have a lot of what would you say? I don't have a lot of background in actual like literature and writing classes, so I get really confused when it comes to telling which tense a story is written from. In this book, we are following our main character. Her name was Blythe, I believe. Yes, and so she's becoming a new mother, and it's her experience of motherhood, and not just her and her connection with her daughter, but also her mom as well. It all just ties together just so well. It's definitely a very I wouldn't say this is a huge thriller, but it does have some definitely psychological elements in this book. So pretty much Blythe believes that something is wrong with her daughter. Like, she does not have the connection that she feels like a mother and daughter should have, and this is even while her daughter is a baby. Up until she grows up, she just feels like that connection just isn't there and something is wrong, but her husband doesn't see it, and he doesn't really believe her, and she doesn't know like if something's wrong with herself or if her daughter really like is psychotic or what. She ends up having a second child, and the experience is completely different. Like, she loves her son. They have this strong connection that she just never felt with her daughter. So it kind of even more so makes the problem worse that she doesn't have this relationship with her oldest daughter. I don't want to give away too much stuff that happens in this book, but there is a lot that goes on from there. And I loved that the chapters were short. This was one of those books that had short chapters as well. I felt like this was very quick to fly through. Like, I could have in one sitting just sat down and read it if I had had the time to do that, but I was able to wake up, you know, a little bit before work, and I would try to read a little bit so that I could get through it quicker, because I didn't want to take too long, and I was really invested in figuring out where the story went, and I really did like the ending, although I'm not going to say any spoilers or anything. Like, I would have liked more information even in that, like in the way that it ends, but I really enjoyed my time reading this book, and I believe that this is the author's debut. This was a very well done, like, psychological drama book, and I am definitely going to be reading whatever else Ashley O'Drain writes. Then we have Luster by Raven Leilani, which I believe is this author's debut novel. I really love this edition. It's from Waterstones and it's the signed edition. It has the really cool orange sprayed edges. And this book, I wanted to like it, and I actually did because I don't know why I even said it like that, but I kind of had doubts going into it just because of the subject matter that it kind of touches on, which I'll get to in a second. But I don't know why I still felt, maybe just because I loved the cover and the design on this book, I was like, well, I'll just give it a chance. I was putting a Waterstones order in anyway, or else I don't think I would have just picked this up on its own. And I decided to just throw it in the cart and see what happens. If worst came to worst, I can list it on Depop or something. And I'm glad though that I actually ended up enjoying this book. We're following our main character. She is a young Black woman working in a publishing office, and she is in this relationship. At the start of the book, she's starting off this relationship with this guy, and he tells her that he's actually in an open relationship, so he's currently married, and he's like an older, middle-aged white man who's from like the suburbs. And him and his wife have a daughter, and she's Black, she's adopted, so she has like an interesting dynamic in that way too. I'm trying to think about what to say and not to say to not give away what happens in this book, because it is pretty short, like it's barely like 200 pages, so this is pretty easy to get through. I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and it only took me like, I think, a day or two to get through. But one thing I did enjoy about this book is that I wasn't expecting was that our main character, she is also an artist, and as someone who likes to paint and stuff and draw and stuff too, I felt like I could connect with her in those scenes. There's like specific scenes where she's creating art and talking about like her relationship with it and things that I just feel like, I don't know, those were just really well written, and I enjoyed reading those parts. Specifically like the situation that, what is her name again? Eddie is her name. She is going from she's like involved in a lot of different relationships in the past. She's kind of just going from person to person, trying to figure out herself. She's very lost. She doesn't have a lot of money, and she's just barely scraping by pretty much. We also see like different microaggressions that she's dealt with in work, and like I said, I'm trying not to give away like too much of what happens in here. While I enjoyed this book, this isn't one that I would necessarily recommend to just anyone and everyone. I could definitely see a lot of people not liking the main character, and she's not, I get it, not that likable, honestly, to read from, and doesn't make the best choices and things, but overall, I enjoyed my time reading this book. One other book that I also got to in February was not one that was planned, but I decided that I wanted to read a Toni Morrison book for the month of February, and I decided to go with Beloved. I think there was someone who was doing some type of read along for this book in February, and I can't even remember who it was. I never looked back into it, and that's kind of like what sparked my interest in wanting to add this to my TBR for the month of February. I've read a lot of Toni Morrison books before, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It's definitely one of her more well-known books, and I just was never assigned to read this in school, but I know a lot of people read this book in high school and have just, like, homework assignments and discussions based off of it. It's just never something that was required reading in any of my English classes in high school. In this book, we're mainly following our main character, Setha, who is a slave, and she ends up escaping from the place that she has been a slave of for so long with her children, and I was somehow able to avoid a lot of spoilers for this book, even though it is a pretty well-known book, so I don't want to tell you guys something that maybe is a spoiler. I do enjoy Toni Morrison's writing, although sometimes I will admit I do struggle a little bit with just understanding some of what she says sometimes. This is a book that I definitely feel like I need to reread before I can fully give you guys like a really good review and like my full thoughts on how I felt about this book. I feel like my review could never do justice to Toni Morrison's books because they're just so layered and touch on so many different themes. And while I'm sure a lot of stuff I've even read in here goes way over my head, so I would definitely recommend looking up people who could better review and explain this book to you. But it is a well-written slave narrative story, but not just even like focusing so much on that. Like, she always touches on these big topics. So respectfully, Toni Morrison in her writing, that I will definitely be rereading this again in the future. I'm going to be rereading all of her books in the future, and I just hope that at that point I will be able to do justice in talking about and reviewing her writing, because she definitely is a great author. And then my last 4-star read was an audiobook that I checked out from my library, which was a new release, and that's called Black Book by Matteo Ascaripour. And this book was the author's debut novel, and I feel like I actually read quite a few debuts last month, and this was another one to me that was really well done. Pretty much the only thing that was, well, not the only thing, but one of the big things that was keeping it from being a higher rating for me was that I am someone who doesn't really like to read a lot of cussing in the books that I read, and I feel like this one just had like so much to the point of not being really unnecessary. But if you're someone who that's not like something that bothers you or is an issue, then I think you would enjoy this book. So we're following this young man, and he is hired on as a salesman at this company, and he's the only young black man who works there. He's hired on by one of the owners, or like one of the higher ups there. Previously, he was just working at Starbucks, taking care of his mom, hanging out with his girlfriend, not really having too much ambition to do better with his life or anything, until he gets the opportunity to work at one of these big like New York tech startups, and he ends up moving through the ranks of this place. But just reading all of the different microaggressions that he experienced working at his workplace, like, it was definitely a very I don't even know, like, infuriating to read, like, the things that people would say. And this book is supposed to be like a bit satirical and on the comedic side, so it's the author has even more so exaggerated like all of the different racist things that could happen to someone in a workplace, and he basically experiences every single thing that you could experience at your job, and he's determined though to make it to the top and to prove that he is overall like the best salesman that the company ever has. And where this book goes, like, I kind of felt like I had an idea of where the book was going, and it kind of got there by like the halfway point of the book, and then from there on it kind of just went in a completely different direction that I wasn't anticipating, but I wasn't mad at. Like, it was definitely interesting, and it was able to keep my attention. Like, this was overall like a really quick, fast-paced audiobook to listen to, and I definitely was interested to keep going. While our main character definitely isn't the most likable person, is still definitely interesting to read from his perspective and to just see everything that he encounters going through this crazy journey. So when the book starts out, he's basically telling you, like, he's explaining all of these events from the future, and he's going to tell you the story, and I just really enjoyed it, and I feel like I will definitely be reading other books by this author. I don't think that I'm going to probably ever reread this book or buy a physical copy of it, but I am definitely looking forward to reading other books by this author. And then last but definitely not least, we had one 5-star read, and I think this is the only one that I've had so far actually this year, and it's kind of a little bit cheating because I knew I already gave it 5 stars the first time, and that was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This was a reread for me because I wanted to read Dear Justice, which I will show you the cover of on here, which is the follow-up to Dear Martin, which I'm still currently reading. I just haven't finished it yet. I was hoping to finish it last month so I could tell you guys both about both of them at the same time, but today it's just Dear Martin. So this book I've already read before. I would highly recommend this book to anyone and everyone to read this book. So we're following Justice McAllister, and he's the top of his class at the school that he goes to, and he's trying to get into an Ivy League college and everything. He's definitely on a path to having a good life and just overall being like a good person and everything. And one day he ends up being put in handcuffs by a police officer, and just the whole experience of going through that, he ends up being released without any charges or anything. But it just really opens his eyes to a lot of the things that are going on around him. He's not from the best school, from the best neighborhood, I should say, and his mom isn't from, and his family life isn't in the best situation either. He has a single mother who is raising him. He starts this journal where he's writing letters to Martin Luther King Jr. That's why it's called Dear Martin, and he's just in this journal working through the feelings of, you know, trying to go beyond people's expectations of him, what they expect from someone in his position to do. And this book is definitely very hard-hitting. Like, I think I cried the first time I read it, and I definitely did again the second time that I read it as well. It definitely, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but it definitely gets into some very hard-hitting stuff in this book. And I'm so glad that I read it again before I went into the next book, and I feel like this is a book that I will probably reread forever. Like, I see myself rereading this multiple times in the future, so this is probably honestly one of my favorite young adult books ever, and I definitely don't say that lightly. So I would highly recommend to you guys, if you have not picked this book up, to read Dear Martin. So those are all the books that I got to last month in February. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my reading for the month, and let me know if you've read any books that were really good in February that you would recommend to me, or if you've even read any of these other ones, and we can talk about it in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!